Hi, everyone. Well, it's late on Sunday night, and I remembered that I hadn't recorded my reading of Ivan yet. So I thought I would curl up with my favorite blanket and read a bedtime story for you and me. Well, we left off with Ivan being pretty disappointed and upset. He tried so hard to show Julia what he was trying to do for Ruby and try to communicate his message to the one person he thought would understand. And she didn't understand. And so now all of his pictures may be all going to Mac and no success in helping Ruby and fulfilling his promise. So we're going to go from there and see what happens. Here we go. This first chapter that I'm reading is called Chest Beating. Often, when visitors come to see me, they beat their hands against their puny chests, pretending to be me. They pound away, soundless, as the wet wings of a new butterfly. The chest beating of a mad gorilla is not something you even want to hear, not even when you're wearing earplugs. Not even when you're 3 miles away wearing earplugs. A real chest beating sends the whole jungle running, as if the sky had broken open, as if men with guns are near. Angry. Thump. The sound, my sound, echoes through the mall. George and Julia spin around. Julia drops her backpack. George drops his keys. The pile of pictures goes flying. Thump, thump, thump. I bounce off the walls. I screech and bellow. I beat and beat and beat my chest. Bob hides under knot tag. His paws are over his ears. I'm angry at last. I have someone to protect. Puzzle pieces. After a long while, I grow quiet. I sit. It's hard work being angry. Julia looks at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. I'm panting. I'm a little out of shape. What on earth was that? George demands. Something's really wrong, Julia says. I've never seen Ivan act this way. He seems to be calming down. Thank goodness, George says. Julia shakes her head. He's still upset, Dad. Look at his eyes. My pictures are scattered all over the floor like huge autumn leaves. What a mess, George says, sighing. Wish I hadn't bothered sweeping tonight. Do you think Ivan's okay? Julia asks. Probably just a temper tantrum, George says. He reaches under a chair to retrieve a brown and red picture. Can't blame the guy. Stuck in that tiny cage all these years. Julia starts to answer, but then she freezes. She turns her head. She stares at her feet, where my pictures lie in disarray. Dad, she whispers, come see this. I'm sure he's another Rembrandt, George says. Let's pick these up and get going, Jules. I'm exhausted. Dad, she says again, seriously, look at this. George follows her gaze. I see blobs, many, many blobs, along with the occasional swirl. Please, can we go home now? That's an H, Dad. Julia kneels down, straightening one picture, then another. That's an H. And here. She grabs more pictures. Put this one here. And, I don't know, maybe that one? You have an E. George rubs his eyes. I hold my breath. I can't get my page. Julia is running now. She picks up one picture, sets down another. It's like a puzzle, Dad. This is something. It's a word, maybe words. And a picture of something, a giant picture. Jules, George says, this is crazy. But he's looking at the floor too, wandering from picture to picture and scratching his head. H, Julia says. E, H-O. Ho? Julia chews up her lower lip. H-E-O. And that looks like a lot like an I. H-E-O-I. George writes in the air with his finger. I-E-O-H. Not the letter, an actual I. And that's a foot. Or maybe a tree. And a trunk, Dad. I think that's a trunk. Julia runs to my window. Ivan, she whispers, what did you make? I stare back. I cross my arms. This is taking much longer than I thought it would. Humans. Sometimes they make chimps look smart. Finally, Julia and George take the pictures to the ring, where there was room to see them all. An hour passes as they try to assemble my puzzle. Ruby's awake now, and she and Bob and I watch. Ivan, Ruby says, is that a picture of me? Yes, I say proudly. Where am I supposed to be? That's a zoo, Ruby. See the walls and the grass and the people looking at you? Ruby squints. Who are all those other elephants? You haven't met them yet, I say. It's a very nice zoo, Ruby says with an approving nod. Bob nudges me with his cold nose. It is indeed. In the ring, Julia pumps her fists in the air. Yes, she cries. I told you, Dad. There it is. H-O-M-E. Home. George gazes at the letters. He spins around to look at me. Maybe it's just a coincidence, Jules. You know, a once-in-a-trillion kind of thing. Like that old saying about the chimp and the typewriter. Give him a long enough and he'll write a novel. I make a grumbling noise, as if a chimp could write a letter, let alone a book. Then how do you explain the rest of it, Jules demands. The picture of Ruby in the zoo. How do you know it's a zoo? George asks. I see a circle on the gate. There's a red giraffe in it. George squints and tilts his head. Are you sure that's a giraffe? I was thinking more along the lines of a deformed cat. It's the logo for the zoo, Dad. It's on all their signs. Explain that. George gives her a helpless smile. I can't begin to. I'm just saying there's got to be a logical explanation. Look how big this is. Julia puts the last piece of Ruby's right ear into place. It's huge. It's definitely large, George agrees. Julia watches me. She chews on her thumbnail. I can see the question in her eyes. She turns back to the paintings and stares at them. Looking, truly looking. A slow smile dawns on Julia's face. Dad, she says, I have an idea. A big idea. Julia races around the edge of my painting, her arms spread wide. Billboard big. I'm not following you. I think this is meant to be on a billboard. That's what Ivan wants. George crosses his arms over his chest. What Ivan wants? He repeated slowly. And you know this because you two have been chatting? Because I'm an artist and he's an artist. Uh-huh, says George. Julia clasps her hand together. Come on, Dad. I'm begging you. George shakes his head. No, I'm not doing that. No billboard. No way. I'll get the ladder, Julia says. You get the glue. I know it's dark out, but the billboard's lit. Mac'll fire me, Jules. Julia considers. But think of the publicity, Dad. Everybody would know about Ruby. You want me to put up a sign that shows Ruby in a zoo with the word home in giant letters? George gestures towards my pictures. A sign, incidentally, that just happens to have been made by a gorilla? Exactly. And you want me to do it without Mac's permission? George asks. Exactly. No, George says. No way. Julia goes to the edge of the ring, careful not to step on any of my paintings. She picks up Mac's claw stick. She walks back and hands it to her father. George runs a finger along the blade. She's just a baby, Dad. Don't you want to help her? But how would it help, Jules? Even if lots of people see Ivan's sign, it doesn't mean anything's going to change. I'm not exactly sure yet. Julia shakes her head. Maybe people will see the sign and they'll know this isn't where Ruby belongs. Maybe they'll want to help too. George sighs and he looks at Ruby, and she waves her trunk. It's a matter of principle, Dad. Principal. L-E, George corrects. Dad, Julia says softly, what if Ruby ends up like Stella? George looks at me, at Ruby, at Julia. He drops the claw stick. The ladder, he says quietly, is in the storage locker. And I'll stop there. It worked. She figured it out. And now George is going to put it up on the billboard. Oh my goodness, so many different things could happen. What do you think they would be? So say it, the billboard's up there. Ruby, other elephants, in a zoo with the word home on it. Who's going to see that and make a difference for Ruby? I want you to think about that really hard, because in order for this to work, somebody has to take some sort of action. Who's it going to be? And what action will they take? Talk about it with your family. I'm interested to find out what you think. All right. Have a great night, you guys. Good night.